So the last time I saw my grandmother was the Saturday after Thanksgiving in 2017. That's just a little less than a year ago. She was lying in bed, barely coherent, and I actually think I woke her up when I went into her bedroom. She had been bedridden since she had suffered the second of two major strokes and had fallen. And the hour that she had spent at Thanksgiving dinner 2 days before had really taken a lot out of her. But my grandmother was nothing but a stubborn old bird. And she was hell-bent and determined to make Thanksgiving dinner. So she came, but it took a lot out of her. And now it was Saturday afternoon, and I was about to head back to San Diego from DFW, be at church the next day because the next day was the first Sunday of Advent. But I wanted to stop by one more time and see my grandmother. And so I walked in and I crawled into bed with her, and I took her little hand in mine, and we talked for a while. And she wasn't making much sense. She was caught in a couple of thought loops that she couldn't get out of. She just kept repeating the same thing over and over and over again. And what I said in return to her really didn't matter. What mattered was, at that moment, was the love that we shared between each other and how we expressed it. Me squeezing her hand and giving her little kisses on her cheek and forehead and placing a well-timed joke to make her laugh. When all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she said, "When are you moving home, Darryl Wade?" My grandmother is about the only person who could get away with calling me Darryl Wade, unless it had a trace of sarcasm or irony or some good-natured ribbing in it. She said to me, "When are you moving home, Darryl Wade?" And the moment of clarity and directness just kind of caught me off guard. She'd been stuck in these thought loops. But in this question, there was forthrightness and lucidness to it. And so I answered her with the only answer that was really available to me. I don't know. I don't know when I'm moving home. And she didn't like that answer one bit. And she started getting agitated. So I added to calm her down, "I tell you what, Grandma, the next time you see me, I promise I'll have come home." "Promise?" she said. "I promise. I'm going to hold you to that." I said, "You do that. And I love you. I got to catch a flight." And I leaned over and I took her hand, and I put it up against my heart, and I gave her a kiss on the lips, and I left. And 2 months later, I got a call from my dad from Dallas saying that my grandmother had died. As we say down south, she went home. And I'm really glad that the last time I saw my grandmother, I didn't lie to her. Because the next time I see her, I'll have come home. And she and I will gather on the beautiful shores down by the riverside with those who have gone before us. We will gather with the sinners, and we'll laugh with the saints, and the line between the two will have melted away because it will not matter anymore. We'll rest beside those still waters in paradise, that place where all pain has ended and even death itself has passed, where we'll never grow old, and tears will be dried, hunger and thirst will be satisfied, and the lion shall lie down with the lamb, and we will study war no more. Now, you might think that such an outlook is naive, that my idea on the afterlife and the eternal is simple. I mean, you know me now. I've been here 6 years with all of my philosophical quandaries and searching for answers and all the times that I've stood in this very place and demythologized Scripture and have torn apart classical Christian theology. You might expect a different theology of the eternal, of life beyond life. But I'm sorry to disappoint you, those of you who feel that way, that I find assurance and rest and security in leaning on the everlasting arm of God under which love and grace abide. And I'm okay with that. You can call me simple. You can say that I'm naive. And this one thing in the Christian faith, I like being childlike. I like my innocence. I like being simple when it comes to what happens to us after we breathe our very last. And to be honest with you, having such a simple view of the afterlife doesn't hurt anyone. It certainly hasn't hurt me. Indeed, I've taken comfort and strength drawn from this very simple and naive theology of the beyond. In fact, there are certain things that are actually better, sisters and brothers, when you're naive about them, in my opinion. Not everything, probably not most things, but there are a certain few things that are just better, in my humble opinion, when it's flavored with a touch of innocence and childlike naivete. Take pro wrestling. It was so much better when I was young, when I thought it was a real athletic combat sport where people worked out their differences in the middle of the squared circle wearing bright spandex. It was much better. I loved it so much. It was so much more fun before I knew that it was a predetermined outcome. And take losing one's tooth. When you're young, it's so exciting. When you're older, it means something's probably not going right. It was something to look forward to when you lost your tooth as a kid because we were completely naive about who was actually participating in the fiduciary exchange of one lost tooth with two measly quarters. Now, I hear in the 21st century, inflation has occurred in the lost tooth market. Maybe the Fed should raise interest rates because these days I hear you can get $5 for a lost tooth. What? Sometimes naive is better. Simple is better. Innocent and childlike is better. And maybe you feel the same. Maybe a simple understanding of what happens when we die brings you strength and comfort, knowing that we'll all gather by the river of life. Maybe it allows you to be more kind, knowing that sinner and saint are just human terms that we place on others to lift them up or put them down, but that in God's eye, next to the riverside, we are all magnificent creations in God's divine image. Maybe such an image of revelation that gets sung about in such saccharine hymns of old give you courage to stand up for justice and goodness because, well, when you have such a simple, naive version of the afterlife, what's the worst that can happen? I get to be with Christ in paradise. But where we cannot allow such a naive and simple and innocent theology of the eternal rest to influence us is giving up on today or turning an apathetic eye to our neighbor or destroying this beautiful creation. John the Revelator is clear about this. If you read the book of Revelation, we do not ascend to be with God up there. God descends to be with us down here. Pop culture has ruined Revelation, not to mention tent revivals. But John of Patmos is clear, crystal clear, that we do not get to discard this world for the next. We are to be in this world, but not to consume this world recklessly or to be consumed by this world with its shiny toys and trinkets. God has been dwelling with us, John tells us. God dwells with us now, John tells us. And John's revelation and vision and dream is that God will dwell with us tomorrow in God's bright city that is located next to the river of life. And so let us not be naive about this sacred truth. We have a part to play in this life and before we get to go on to the next. As Ulysses says in Dante's Divine Comedy, as he leaves Ithaca and sails with his men towards the island of Purgatory, we are not meant to live like beasts and brutes, but we are to pursue virtue and knowledge. This is what all of Summer Sunday School has been about. Virtue and knowledge. Teaching through this fascinating metaphor of God as the ocean to teach our children about God's amazing, deep, and abundant love, but also to teach them about how the fragile ecosystem that is the ocean and how important it is to us. And that we must be good stewards of this gift from God that God has put in our hands, that we must take immense care of it. This past week, we learned that the largest ice shelf in Greenland has split and is sliding towards the seas. The sea is warming. Corals are dying. Sea life of all shapes and sizes are going extinct. The climate shifts and extreme weather become more and more of our reality every single day. And it would be naively dangerous of us, sisters and brothers, for us just to throw our hands up in the air and sing the sweet by and by, alleviating ourselves of our duties as God's steward and taking an apathetic view of the call to be Christ's disciples in these times such as these. A naive, simple, childlike, wonderful view of the afterlife is not dangerous. But how we apply such a theology can be. At my godson's graduation this past May, when I was on sabbatical, the principal of the school took a bit of a liberty during the ceremony. The principal didn't have an address. It wasn't printed in the ceremony that he was going to give an address, but he had the microphone, and who was going to stop him? So before he turned the ceremony over to the school board to certify the diplomas, the principal took advantage of having the microphone in his hands to address those soon-to-be his former students. And he congratulated them, just like most you would think, on their achievement, wished them well in their future endeavors, and gushed about how proud of them he was. But then his address changed a little bit. As a former Army colonel, this principal said that using one's voice and being engaged in the American democracy is one of the most important things that these students can do. And he mentioned that besides GPA, your grade point average, that students who qualify for National Honor Society must show leadership and high moral character. He then listed what National Honor Society deems as high moral character, and this is what it says. A student of good character is cooperative, demonstrates a high standard of honesty, reliability, shows courtesy, concern, and respect for others, and generally maintains a clean disciplinary record. He finished his remarks before turning it over to the school board by saying, "We required such standards of you. Now you must maintain such standards for yourself. But also, students, you must hold the leaders that you elect to such standards or higher. Use your voice to make a difference in our country." And I stood up, beginning to clap. But I noticed that I was one of only few who thought the principal's remarks deserved a standing ovation. People were too distracted by their phones or their tablets, much more concerned with capturing the moment on a picture than doing any sort of introspection or reflection on matters of morality or ethics or civics. We are in this world, but we are not to be consumed by it. We are not to be distracted by our shiny trinkets and toys. We are to pursue virtue and knowledge, be co-creators with God who dwells with us. We must hold ourselves as we hold our students who are about to begin school again and our leaders to the highest standards of honesty and reliability. We must say to them and to us and to our leaders that they must show courtesy and concern and respect for others, including the non-human others of our creation and maintain a clean disciplinary record. Yesterday, we lost the leader in our country, Senator John McCain. I didn't always like and agree with his political stances, though there were many that I was proud that he was a champion of. But that today means very little. And obviously, all I know of the man is what I've read and seen. One thing I did find out this morning was that he was inducted into National Honor Society. But it's telling to me how a person looks back on their life as they become very aware that the life beyond is approaching. In an interview last year, after being diagnosed with brain cancer, he said two things that struck me and added to my admiration of him as a person. I quote from the interview, "I could look back on my life and all the mistakes I've made, and there have been many, and I could feel an enormous amount of guilt. But my mistakes are what formed me and shaped me for who I am. I take responsibility for them, and I ask people to forgive me. But I do not look back on my life with shame. I look back on my life with gratitude." Godspeed, John Sidney McCain III. Godspeed to your home by the river of life. May you be at rest. And look for my grandma. She admired you and liked you a lot. And I look forward to seeing you both when that day comes, when I get to go home too. Amen and amen.